Today I'm going to tell you a story so raw it will sit heavy in your chest, set deep in the unforgiving American West, where winter wind cuts like a blade and the horizon swallows men whole. It's a place where survival isn't guaranteed, and mercy can cost more than blood. It began with a single gunshot in the snow, one wounded rider collapsing in a widow's wheat field. A small moment, quiet and desperate, but powerful enough to change the fate of everyone under that roof. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Winter of '76. I stood in Ruth Calder's doorway, staring down the barrel of her late husband's rifle, and I couldn't fault her for it. I'd bled half my life into her wheat field, my horse stretched cold beside me, 3 slugs in my body, put there by men who wanted Cole Barrett buried quiet and forgotten. She had every reason to let me die where I fell. Truth be told, I might have done the same. But Ruth didn't squeeze the trigger. She hauled my half-dead carcass across her threshold, burned through the last of her dried herbs on my wounds, and handed me broth meant for her children. Through the haze of fever, I figured she was either touched by God or plain out of her mind. She was neither, just cornered. And folks with nothing left to lose, they make the fiercest allies you'll ever find. What she didn't know yet was that saving me would shake the very ground she stood on. What I didn't know was that her mercy would crack something open inside me that I'd buried deep. A Montana winter can kill a man 3 ways: freeze him stiff, starve him hollow, or let despair finish the job. I discovered a 4th: letting a woman look at you like you're still worth saving. The fever near tore me apart. I'd wake unsure if I lay in her cabin or back in that frozen gulch with Silas Crowe's riders firing into me. Pain burned everywhere. My shoulder where the bullet tore through, my ribs' old damage ripped open again, my skull ringing from where it struck the ice when I hit the ground. But worse than the pain was what I heard in the quiet. Ruth and her children whispering as they split what little food they had. 3 bowls, 3 spoons. I counted them in my delirium. The boy Levi I'd later learn no more than 12, insisting his mama take the bigger share. The girl Sadie, older and sharper, claiming she wasn't hungry. A flat-out lie if I'd ever heard one. 4 days passed before I could hold my eyes open without the room pitching sideways. Ruth was bent over me replacing the bandages. Her hands were calloused from work, but steady and careful where it counted. In the glow of the oil lamp, I saw she wasn't old at all. 34, maybe. Weariness carved under her eyes, her jaw tight like she'd bite clean through the next man who tested her. "You got a name, mister?" she asked, without glancing up. That was the crossroads. I could have lied. Probably should have. But the way she looked at me, measured like she'd already weighed the odds and was waiting on the truth, made me speak plain. Cole Barrett. Double H Ranch, 40 miles east. I drew a breath that felt like swallowing knives. "And yes, ma'am, the men who shot me will be riding back." Her throat tightened as she swallowed. "You need to understand something," I went on. "They ain't just hunting me. They're tying off loose ends." Her eyes sharpened. "You just became one." She shot to her feet so fast the wash basin tipped and spilled across the floor. "Get out." "I would if I could stand," I said evenly. "But I can't. And even if I could, you've got maybe 2 days before they circle back to make sure I'm dead in your field." I held her gaze. Didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Ruth. Truly. But you deserve to know what you stepped into." Levi filled the doorway. Then that old rifle braced in shaking hands. "Mama?" "It's all right, Levi," she said, never taking her eyes off me. "Mr. Barrett was just telling me how his trouble's about to land square on our doorstep." "Only if you handle it wrong," I said evenly. "When they ride in, And you tell them you found a body in your field, a stranger, buried him past your fence line. I met Ruth's eyes. Keep your voice calm. Keep the story short. Men like that don't chase details if there ain't any to grab. You're asking us to lie. It wasn't said as a question. I'm asking you to stay alive, I answered. Clean hands won't mean much if you're dead. Sadie stepped around Levi, her gaze sharp as a drawn blade. What did you do, she asked, to make men want you in the ground, smart girl? I admired that. I uncovered proof, I said, forcing myself upright against the pain. Silas Crowe's been siphoning supplies meant for Tall Bear's people. Bribing Edgar Pike to look the other way, skimming money set aside for food and blankets, then stirring up bad blood between settlers and the tribes to hide it. I swallowed hard. I was riding for Fort Benton, planned to put that proof in Marshal Boone Hale's hands. Crowe's riders caught me first. Sadie didn't blink. So now you expect us to see you as some kind of hero. Her voice was flat and wide as the prairie. I'm no hero, I said. I'm the fool who dragged a war to your door. But for once in my sorry life, I was trying to do right. I motioned to the bandages wrapped tight around my ribs. You can see how that worked out. Ruth studied me in silence. I could almost hear her thinking, measuring risk, weighing cost, trying to carve a path through danger that didn't end with her children paying the price. Finally, she exhaled. How much I frowned. What, don't insult me, Mr. Barrett. You've got land. I'm $340 from losing mine. So tell me, what's your life worth? There it was. No softness, no shame, just a mother fighting for survival. I should have bristled. Instead, I felt something like respect. Everything I said quietly. My life's worth every acre I own. But first we make sure we're all breathing long enough to settle accounts. I looked at Levi, at Sadie, then back at Ruth. She's right to ask, I added. But this ain't charity. It's a partnership. I clear your mortgage. You keep me hidden till I'm on my feet. When Crowe's men come sniffing around, we each play our part. Ruth's jaw tightened. Pride and desperation battled across her face. Deal, she said at last, barely above a whisper. God help me. Deal! They rode in on the 6th day. By then I was strong enough to move into the root cellar. Levi had helped me build a false floor, clever boy, steady hands. I lay beneath it with a pistol Ruth pressed into my palm. From the dark, I heard hooves stop outside. Afternoon, ma'am. Wade Cutter, Silas Crowe's foreman. His voice grated like gravel dressed up in politeness. We're searching for a man, he went on. Tall, dark hair, likely wounded. Might have passed this way about a week ago. Ruth didn't falter. We don't get many strangers this far out. Haven't seen anyone fitting that description. A pause. Mind if we look around? Just to be certain, I do mind, she replied. My children are inside. I don't allow armed strangers near them. Silence stretched tight. Below the floorboards, I tightened my grip on the pistol, knowing that if Wade Cutter stepped past her threshold, we were all as good as dead. If Wade Cutter had pushed past Ruth Calder that afternoon, we would have been corpses by sundown. Fair enough, ma'am, he said at last, though the sweetness had gone from his tone. There was iron underneath it now. But if you happen to see a man like that, you send word. A pause. There's a reward. $200. Then the hoofbeats faded. When the yard went quiet, Ruth lifted the trap door and climbed down into the cellar. She sank onto the dirt beside me, shaking so hard her teeth knocked together. Without thinking, I slipped my good arm around her. She went rigid at first. Then, slowly, inch by inch, she leaned into me. I've never lied like that, she whispered. Not to armed men. You did what you had to, I said. You kept Levi and Sadie safe. She swallowed. Did I? Or did I just make this worse? I didn't have an answer for that. So we sat there in the damp earth and onion stink of the cellar, both trembling, neither willing to say out loud what line we'd just crossed. That night, once the children were asleep, she helped me upstairs. I lowered myself into a chair at Grant Calder's old table while she set a kettle over the stove. The smell told me it was real coffee. That meant she was burning through supplies she couldn't spare. "Tell me about Clara," she said without warning. I blinked. "How'd you know her name?" "You called for her," Ruth replied. "While the fever had you." She placed the cup before me. "The way you said it, she was your wife." 7 years gone, I answered, wrapping my hands around the heat. Consumption took her. I built the double H for her. By the time it was finished, she was already fading. "I'm sorry." "So am I muttered. Every single day, I looked up. "What about your husband, Grant?" she said softly. "Pneumonia. 4 months back." Her voice caught just barely. "He was a good man. Better than I ever was." "I doubt that." Our eyes locked then. Something passed between us, not desire, not yet. Just recognition. We understood each other's scars. That was enough. "This arrangement," Ruth said carefully, "it's business. Nothing more. Agreed I won't dishonor Grant's memory. I'm not asking you to." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew we were fooling ourselves. Not about some grand love we barely knew one another. We were lying about the quiet shift happening between us. Every time she changed my bandages, and her fingers lingered a breath too long. Every time I caught her watching me when she thought I didn't notice. Every time Levi asked about horses and fences, and I saw how starved that boy was for steady guidance. Whatever was taking root in that house, it hadn't asked permission. 2 weeks later, I could move around some. My shoulder still burned, but I could split wood mend a fence, make myself useful. The barn roof sagged worse than Ruth had admitted. I spent 3 days bracing it with rough-cut beams to keep it from caving in. Sadie kept watch the whole time, eyes sharp as flint. "You planning on staying?" she asked one afternoon. "Not planning past tomorrow," I replied. "Mama likes you." I paused mid-swing. "Your mama's scared and alone," I said. "I'm convenient. That ain't the same thing." Sadie handed me another nail. "You like her too," she said evenly. "And that's the dangerous part. Lord, that girl was sharper than a trap set in spring. What makes you so sure?" I asked. "Because you look at Mama the way Papa used to," Sadie said. "Before he got sick. Before he stopped looking at anything but his boots." She held my eyes without flinching. "And because you're lying to yourself." That night, I dreamed of Clara Barrett for the first time in years. But when I jolted awake, it wasn't Clara's face burned behind my eyelids. It was Ruth Calder's. The way lamplight threaded gold through her hair. The quiet slope of her neck when she bent over her sewing. The sound of her laugh when Levi tried telling a joke that didn't quite land. I was in trouble. Not the kind measured in gunpowder and blood. The kind that creeps up slow and wraps around your ribs. Wanting something you have no business wanting. Ruth felt it too. Sometimes I'd catch her studying me from across the room, only for her cheeks to color and her eyes to drop. Once we both reached for the same plate, our fingers brushed. She pulled back like my touch scalded. That night I heard her crying in the room beyond mine. Soft. Careful. Whether it was grief for Grant, guilt over what she felt, or something she couldn't name, I didn't know. Then the storm came. Wind screaming across the plains like it meant to rip the cabin off its foundation. Snow stacking high against the windows. Levi and Sadie asleep in their beds while Ruth and I sat near the fire, nursing the last of the coffee. We didn't speak. Just sat in the same space, aware of each other in a way that made the air heavy. "Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked out of nowhere. "For being alive," I said. "Every damn day." "Me too." She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Grant wanted me strong, told me to keep pushing forward. But some mornings I wake up and think, what's the point? Her voice trembled. Why fight this hard if everything slips through your fingers anyway? I should have fed her some polished lie about resilience and frontier grit. Instead, I gave her the truth. Out here quitting comes easy, I said. You just never learned how. She looked at me then. Not a passing glance, she really looked. Something shifted in her eyes. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. Something risky. Cole, she said softly, like she was testing the weight of my name on her tongue. It near undid me. I stood up too fast, needing space before I crossed a line we couldn't redraw. I ought to check the barn, I muttered. In this weather, she asked. Better than staying here. She rose too, close enough that I could smell the faint soap on her skin. Close enough to see the pulse beating at her throat. Why, she asked quietly. You know why. We stood there, breath shallow, the fire snapping behind us while the wind battered the walls. Something was building between us, hotter than flame, deadlier than any bullet I'd ever faced. Then she stepped back. You're right, she whispered. Check the barn. I grabbed my coat and walked out before my restraint snapped. The cold hit like a slap. Snow blew through the cracks in the barn walls, settling in white drifts across the floor. I stood there, in the freezing, dark fists clenched, cursing myself. Cursing her. Cursing whatever merciless hand wrote a winter like this. But most of all, I hated that deep down I knew there was no outrunning what was growing between us. Sora dismounting slowly outside Garrick's ranch fence at sunset, tying her horse with steady hands, dust glowing copper in the fading Arizona light 1850s. Frontier. Realism, quiet, emotional tension. Garrick opening the wooden ranch gate without ceremony, stepping back to give space. Wind moving between them as equal ground is offered, cinematic Western composition. Sora stepping through the open gate alone, chin lifted, no sign of rescue or dependence. Desert wind catching the edge of her garments, strong 1850s frontier. Woman portrait Garrick and Sora walking side by side across the ranch yard, long shadows stretching and merging in the red sunset light. No one leading. No one following poetic Western visual interior of the small ranch cabin at night. Stove fire. Burning low, warm amber glow against rough wooden walls. Garrick seated quietly while Sora stands near the doorway. Contemplative 1850s homestead atmosphere. Close-up of Garrick's scarred left shoulder in firelight. Faint ache beneath healed wound symbol of past choices. Cinematic detail shot with soft ember glow. Sora standing in the cabin doorway, looking out into the dark desert wind brushing her hair, gently expression calm and resolved, no fear in her eyes. Intimate Western portrait. Wide exterior night shot of the ranch under starlit Arizona sky, wind circling fence rails and cabin walls. Isolation transformed into chosen peace. 1850s. Frontier serenity. Morning light entering through cabin window, illuminating simple wooden table, 2 tin cups resting side by side. Subtle suggestion of shared space. Quiet, domestic Western realism. Garrick repairing tack beside the barn, while Sora checks the horse's reins, both working independently, yet within the same frame partnership without dominance. Historical ranch life scene. Sora walking the perimeter of the ranch, land alone at dawn, studying the horizon with measured confidence. Golden light touching desert grasses, visual metaphor for claimed freedom. Garrick watching from a distance without interference, hat shading his eyes, respecting her space, open desert stretching behind him, restrained emotional Western imagery. Close-up of intertwined shadows on cabin wall, cast by morning sun, 2 figures moving separately yet harmoniously, symbolic. 1850s frontier composition, evening scene, with Sora seated beside small outdoor fire wind, steady but gentle desert. Quiet after long struggle, her posture grounded and self-possessed. Garrick standing at fence line under twilight sky hammer resting at his side, looking not at the horizon, but toward the cabin light shift from solitude to chosen connection. Wide panoramic shot of the Tucson Desert Ranch under vast open sky fences, standing firm, well-constructed, solidly symbol of stability in harsh 1850s, frontier environment interior. Knight Garrick and Sora seated across from one another at wooden table. No dramatic gestures, only steady eye contact in low firelight, mature unspoken understanding, wind moving across the ranch at dawn, stirring dust lightly, but not violently, peaceful continuation, rather than storm-symbolic closing western landscape. Final wide shot of Garrick and Sora standing shoulder to shoulder outside the cabin as morning sun rises behind them. Silhouettes strong against open land equality and endurance in 1850s. American frontier last image, empty stretch of red hollow, under calm sky wagon wheel long gone only wind crossing clean, sand sense of justice endured, and future unwritten cinematic western epilogue scene. I looked at Ruth. She looked back at me. "Did you, Sadie?" I said the truth, hitting me all at once. Last week when I'd sent her to check the far fence line, I'd pressed a folded letter into her hand, told her to ride hard and put it in Marshal Boone Hale's hands. "You planned this?" Ruth asked. "I planned for the worst," I answered. "It's the only reason I'm still breathing." Silas Crowe and his men tried to bolt once the marshal's riders closed in. 2 of them broke through. 3 never made it past the yard. Marshal Boone Hale himself hauled Crowe upright and snapped irons on his wrists. Crowe spat blood in the snow, cursing us, both swearing we'd pay. "Shut it, Crowe," I said, limping forward. "You lost." "Did I?" he sneered through red-stained teeth. "Take a look around, Barrett. I didn't need to. You burned that woman's barn," he went on. "Her winter feed, her peace." He leaned closer. "All so you could play hero for 5 damn minutes." The marshal dragged him off, but the words stayed. Because he wasn't wrong. I'd brought this storm to Ruth Calder's door. I'd put Levi and Sadie in the line of fire. I'd cost her the one thing she couldn't afford to lose: safety. Ruth stood in the doorway staring at the barn as it collapsed into flame and ash. She didn't cry, didn't speak. Marshal Boone Hale left 2 deputies behind before riding Crowe back toward Fort Benton. Said the trial would drag on. Said I'd be needed to testify. Said a lot of things that didn't change the smoke curling into the winter sky. That evening I found Ruth on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the last embers fade. "Insurance will cover the barn," I said. "I'll see to it." "With whose money?" she asked without looking at me. "Yours I owe you. You owe me nothing." Her voice was level. "We had an agreement. You paid your debt." She finally turned her head. "Go home, Cole. Back to the Double H. Back to your life. We survived before you showed up." She swallowed. "We'll survive after." "I don't want to go. I don't care what you want." The tremor beneath her words gave her away. But pressing her now would only drive her further off. So I did something I hadn't done since Clara Barrett died. I chose someone else's need over my own pride. "I'm selling the Double H," I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me. "I've already written Arthur Kincaid in Denver. He'll pay fair, more than fair." I nodded toward the smoking ruins. "I'll rebuild the barn right, buy you cattle, set aside money for Levi and Sadie's schooling." "Charity," she snapped. "Partnership," I corrected. "If you want to call it charity, that's your pride speaking. I call it 2 busted souls deciding to build something new from what's left." I sat beside her, careful not to touch. "I'm not Grant," I said. "I never could be. But I can be a man who shows up. A man who stays." She studied me then. Why, she asked softly. Why give up everything for people you barely know? Because 7 years ago I stopped living, I answered. I just kept moving, built the double H out of grief and stubbornness so I wouldn't drown in it. I gestured toward the house. The ruined barn. The land she fought for every day. The land. All of it. I bled out in your wheat field and woke up to realize the world hadn't finished with me yet. Turns out life still keeps a few cards hidden. Like a woman hard enough to drag a dying stranger across her threshold, and soft enough to remind him what it feels like to sit at a table that isn't empty. Tears slid down Ruth's cheeks. I feel like I'm betraying Grant, she whispered. Every time I look at you and start to think what I asked gently. That maybe I don't want to be alone anymore. Her voice cracked. That maybe he'd understand. That maybe it's not wrong to let someone else in, even if it feels like tearing open scars that barely closed. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. I'm not asking for forever, I said. Not tomorrow. Hell, not even next week. I drew a steady breath. I'm asking if we can figure this out side by side. Slow, honest, no more secrets, no more debts, just partnership. Her fingers tightened around mine. I don't know if I can, she said. Then we start there, I answered, with not knowing. We sat together until the last coals dimmed to ash. Two people marked by loss, holding on in the dark, trying to decide whether faith was just another word for hope or something braver. Spring came late that year. But when it finally pushed through the thaw, it carried fresh-cut timber for a new barn, cattle grazing where smoke once rose, and a quiet understanding between Ruth Calder and me that felt steadier than any vow. I didn't move into her house. Wouldn't have been right. Ruth still held to her standards no matter how hard winter had tested her. Instead, I bought the parcel next to hers and put my days into rebuilding. She ran her land like she'd been born to it. Levi took to carpentry, fast hands, steady mind sharp. Sadie learned numbers and ledgers managing accounts better than most grown men, and slowly, so gradual you'd miss it if you blinked, we became something close to family. Not the one we'd lost, but one chosen. Ruth and I didn't rush. We shared morning coffee on the porch, worked the fields shoulder to shoulder, let fingertips brush, let glances linger. Built trust brick by careful brick. 6 months after the fire, I finally kissed her. It felt like stepping into a home I'd been searching for without knowing it. We married in the fall. Small gathering, just kin and a handful of neighbors. Sadie stood beside her mother. Levi stood beside me. When Pastor Eli Grayson asked if I would take this woman as my wife, I looked at Ruth not just at who she was, but at who we might become together. I do, I said. God help me. I do. I've never claimed to be the hero of this story, but I'm breathing. I'm loved. And every morning I wake beside a woman strong enough to have let me die, yet merciful enough to let me live. Strong enough to have watched me die in her field. Soft enough to choose otherwise. That has to mean something. So, if you'll pardon me, my coffee's gone stone cold, and Ruth Calder's voice is carrying through the screen door, calling me in before supper burns. I don't pretend my story's special. There are plenty of men walking this country with ghosts riding their shoulders. Plenty of women holding homes together with grit and prayer. More folks than you'd think lying awake at night wondering if their one good chance already passed them by. Maybe what happened here wasn't about bullets or barns or even justice. Maybe it was about second chances. About two stubborn souls deciding that breathing wasn't enough, that living meant risking your heart again. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. As long as you're still standing, as long as there's breath in your lungs, it ain't too late. Some men never get that shot. I did. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.